Carousel of Life, Day 29, Bien Joué. A Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction written based on the Adrien April 2019 daily prompts. If you're new to this story, check out the description box for links to the previous chapters or click on the card in the upper right corner for the playlist. And now let's take a ride on the Carousel of Life. Marinette detransformed behind a tree and Tiki phased despondently into her purse in search of cookies. She heard her phone chime with the happy "Paris is safe once again" jingle, indicating that the Akuma had been taken care of. It was a relief to see the Place des Vosges in one piece again, without gashes in space-time creating pockets of gravitational sinking sand, warping and stretching the matter around them so that it seemed to melt like nightmarish taffy, resembling a scene from a Dali painting. After taking a moment to catch her breath, back pressed against the tree with the bark biting her skin through her thin cotton shirt, Marinette launched herself off with her elbows and began to walk. The air was eerily quiet aside from the sound of bird calls and insects, as civilians had yet to start coming out of Akuma lockdown mode. The sun on her dark hair felt heavy and warm, seeming to seep into her scalp and tug on the backs of her eyeballs. She could go for a nap right now. Rapid footsteps crunching the gravel behind her announced the presence of another human being in the park. She whipped around, instantly alert, her reflexes still sharp from battle despite her lethargy. Her face brightened when she saw who it was. "Oh, Adrien! What were you thinking?" His voice was taut, dry as tinder. Marinette flinched, taken aback at the veiled ferocity in his tone. His fists were balled, his eyes set with a dangerous, smoldering intensity that scared her a little. "What do you mean?" "Why would you do that?" he demanded. "Do what?" Marinette was honestly confused. She skimmed the events of the battle for what could possibly have upset him, and finding nothing, searched further back to their civilian interactions. Adrien wiped his eyes on the back of his arm, which called Marinette's attention to the fact that his cheeks were shiny with tears. "What did I do?" Marinette inquired, alarmed. "I was trying to protect you," he fumed, "and you pushed me out of the way. I saw the cosmologist's blade get so close. He cut your hair, Marinette." Surreally calm in contrast to Adrien's worked-up state, Marinette fingered the tips of her left pigtail, remembering feeling the wind of the magic blade slicing through the air under her ear. It had happened in a split second and didn't register as a critical moment in her mind until now. "Calm down, Adrien. I'm fine. My hair's back to normal." She reached out a hand to touch his shoulder or something, anything to help him relax, but he caught it in mid-air and held it tightly. He was shaking and his palms were sweaty. "This is not about your hair," he rasped, enunciating each word as tears streamed down his cheeks. "Nothing happened to me," Marinette murmured, making a point to lower her voice as a hint that they shouldn't be having this conversation so loudly in a public place, even if there weren't many people out. "And plus, you do it all the time." "I'm supposed to do it all the time," Adrien protested in a hiss. Marinette glared, feeling only a little guilty but a lot indignant that he was actually daring to argue that he should have gotten sliced in half by the Akuma. "You really don't have to," she argued. "There are other options, you know, like maybe getting us both to safety instead of just offering yourself up as a sacrifice. If you weren't going to do it responsibly, someone had to." "There wasn't much time to think. I couldn't let you get hit, that's all I was concerned with at the time." Frustration pricked Marinette's heart. Her inner calm was quickly crumbling. "That's the problem, you don't think ahead. How do you think I'd feel seeing you die? You think I could have fought with a level head after that?" "I'm not the one who wasn't thinking ahead," Adrien whispered tersely, stepping closer so Marinette wouldn't have any trouble hearing him despite his lowered voice. "What you did was too risky. What would have happened if you'd gotten hit? Who would have repaired the rips in space-time and prevented this entire universe from unraveling? What would we do then? Sorry, Bugaboo, I can only destroy things, not fix them. So you'd better get used to the idea of seeing me die more often, because between the two of us, you're the only one who can bring people back from the dead." Marinette felt like an iron fist had closed around her heart and squeezed. He was right, and she hated it. She pressed her free hand over her eyes, at a loss for words as reality hit her like a blow to the gut. It was bad enough seeing what Chanois had to put himself through when she didn't know he was Adrien. "Knowing it's me shouldn't change anything," she heard him say in a much softer tone than before. "I have my role in battle, and you have to let me fulfill it. Okay?" Marinette grit her teeth, unable to answer. Adrien's grip on her hand loosened and he let go. Defensively, she brought it to join her other hand on her face. She didn't want anyone to see her cry. Not Adrien, and not the citizens in the park. But she couldn't hold it back until she could get somewhere private. Ever so gently, Adrien's arms folded around her shoulders and he pulled her close, applying soft pressure to the back of her head until she relaxed against his collarbone. She gave in to the tears, listening to the steady pounding of his heartbeat as he rubbed her back. "Sorry for yelling. I was upset." His voice was warm and smooth as honeyed tea. "I don't want you to get hurt for me," she whimpered feebly. "And I hate watching you die. I hate that I can even say something as horrible as that. What kind of torture is it that I have to watch you die over and over again? I hate Hawkmoth." "Pretend it's just a dream," he murmured against her hair. The words made her sick. She didn't like the idea of tricking herself into thinking that the boy she loved wasn't being extinguished from existence every time she saw him disappear, or that the pain he suffered during battle wasn't real just because she had the power to undo it. She didn't want to be desensitized to what Adrien had to go through. "Maybe I don't want to do that." "What choice do we have? This is what we have to deal with." Marinette didn't answer. She hugged Adrien tighter. She'd rather die 100 times than watch him die once, even if she knew she could bring him back. She understood now what Chanois had meant that time he came to her asking what to do about Ladybug, when he'd explained how difficult it was to separate his love for her with his willingness to die for her. "You okay?" Adrien asked in a hushed tone, all the fire gone from his voice. Marinette nodded and brought a hand up to wipe her eyes and nose. "I'm sorry. You're right. I was rash." "Maybe we should talk to our Kwamis about this," he suggested. "They've seen a lot and maybe they have some advice." Marinette nodded again. "Good idea." Still pressed into his chest, she heard a fluctuation in his heartbeat as they stayed like that a moment longer. Then he spoke again, soft as velvet. "I love you, my ladybug." The words hung in the air. The wall of feigned ignorance between them had clearly broken down long ago, but they'd been in the heat of an argument. Now they were both keenly aware of what they were doing and what this meant. "My Chanois." Leaning into his ear as she said it, she pressed a kiss into the junction between his earlobe and his neck and felt him sigh. "I love you so much. And as much as it scares me to know that you're the one who keeps throwing yourself in danger for me, I'm so happy it's been you all along." Adrien turned his head to nose her bangs, and she saw that he was smiling faintly. "Me too, Bugaboo. I feel the same way." Leaning in to kiss the tears off her cheeks one by one, he gazed at her tenderly for a long moment, heart swirling with affection and amazement that the girl he loved was willing to risk her life for him. As much as the thought sickened him that she'd actually do it, he treasured the sentiment. "This may seem inappropriate, but can I get something out of my system?" Marinette looked at him inquisitively. With an impish grin, he bent his knees to lift her by the waist and spin her around giddily. "It's you, it's you, it's you! You're my lady!" He laughed, then set her down and planted a hard kiss on her forehead. "Wow, it feels so good to say that. I knew it all along. My brilliant, beautiful, sweet, adorable love. Of course it had to be you." It was hard to remain upset when Adrien's face was shining with joy and laughter, and he was showering her with praise in such an innocently punch-drunk way. Soon Marinette was laughing too. Standing on tiptoes, she draped her arms around his neck and met his lips with hers. "It does feel good, doesn't it?" She sighed contentedly. We'll be okay, won't we? Aren't we always? Adrien pulled back a bit and held out his fist. Giggling, Marinette tapped it with hers. Marinette sat cross-legged on Adrien's couch, and Adrien sat beside her, elbows on his knees. Both gave their rapt attention to the small red Kwame hovering in midair before them, stern expression on her face. I'll have you know, Adrien, I was against this from the beginning. Fighting against Miraculous holders is dangerous enough, and throwing teenage romance into the equation makes the situation much more risky. Tiki's sweet voice was tight with forced firmness, as if she were trying to underline the graveness of the words coming out of her mouth. I understand. Adrien nodded responsibly. But what's done is done, and all we can do is move forward. Now that you know one another's identities, you'll need to be more united than ever. Tiki lectured, slowly pacing the airspace before the two, like a drill sergeant giving a briefing. If you want this to work, you'll have to strengthen one another, not weaken. You should consider yourselves as one unit, neither complete without the other. Any rift in your relationship could be the chink in your armor that causes you to fail. Remember the Heroes' Day fight? Tiki paused in the air and slowly looked each of them in the eye. They both thought back to that day and nodded. Why did Carapace and Rena Rouge fall? Tiki quizzed. Rena protected Carapace and got hit by Disloca, then Carapace panicked, Marinette answered, fully aware of how that must have upset Nino's psyche. Adrien looked at her in confusion, feeling like he was missing the point, but Tiki moved on. And what about Queen Bee? Ah, this one Adrien knew the answer to. Hawkmoth brought in her family, he chipped in. Right, we had extra Miraculous holders brought in because the fight was going to be too much for you two to handle on your own, but the whole support team fell when people they loved were threatened or involved. They became Hawkmoth's tools and you ended up having to fight them too. Now do you understand how dangerous it is to be emotional during a fight? Love can be a weakness if you lose sight of your goal. But it can also be a strength, Marinette murmured, thinking painfully of how Chanoir exhausted himself to protect her. Yes, Tiki conceded. That's why you need to cultivate your relationship so you can work together seamlessly, and always communicate. If you let something stay unresolved between you two and it clutters your minds during battle, it'll be a distraction. They nodded. The magic you're dealing with is much more powerful than you, Tiki warned. You need to be careful with your emotions and keep them reined in while wielding the miraculous. In the Han Dynasty, a ladybug and Chanoir who were secret lovers ended up killing one another in the heat of passion. Wow, that escalated quickly, Adrien muttered under his breath. Tiki's eyes narrowed on him. Sorry. He raised his hands, palms out. I didn't mean to make light. No disrespect intended. Go on, Tiki. Always consider the big picture and the strategy behind your actions. Don't just get caught up in the moment, Tiki continued, as if going down a mental list of points she wanted to hit. Adrien turned slightly, his eyes flicking to meet Marinette's. She returned his look, practically reading the "see" in his mind, but at least he had the grace to look sorry about it. Feeling ill at the thought, she looked away, internalizing that she'd have to get used to the idea of using her boyfriend as a human shield. That, Tiki snapped, tiny hands on her hips. What just went on between you now? None of that during battle, do you understand? You can't make it about you when you're fighting against Hawkmoth. Give it a rest, Sugar Cube, Plag drawled through a mouthful of cheese from his spot on the coffee table. They're not on the battlefield now. Let them be human. I'm just making a point, stinky sock, Tiki countered. It's because she loves you, Plag explained to Adrien and Marinette on Tiki's behalf. Right, Sugar Cube? Tiki's eyes softened as she seemed to realize maybe she was being too harsh. Of course I do. Adrien, Marinette, I care about you very much and I want you to be safe. I want you to understand that this isn't a game and that there could be terrible consequences for any wrong step. But you know that I love and support you both wholeheartedly, don't you? Of course we do, Tiki, Marinette smiled. Tiki flew over to nuzzle her cheek, then Adrian's as he echoed Marinette's sentiment. Thank you, Tiki. Adrien rubbed her head affectionately with his fingers as she gave him a cheek hug. We appreciate the tips. One last thing, Tiki added, sobering up a little from the mini love fest. Please exercise caution. It's important that you keep acting the same as always when the Miraculous are activated. Shanwao's flirting and everything. Try to keep your dynamic the same as it's always been. Hawkmoth can sense emotions, so he may be able to intuit that something has changed between you if you aren't careful. Adrien threw Marinette a mischievous look, amused that Tiki was basically instructing him to flirt. And even though you both know, you still need to keep your personal and superhero lives strictly separate to avoid inadvertently dropping clues that could tip off others, especially Hawkmoth. Both teens nodded. Anything to add, Plag? No canoodling while you're suited up, Plag snickered. Human love is so gross. Plag? Adrien cried, appalled as Marinette's cheeks prickled with heat. Later, once the lecture was over and the Kwame's attention was elsewhere, Marinette wove her fingers between Adrien's and vowed, I won't let you down. No matter how many times she had to watch him die, she was determined to bring him back. Love is going to make me stronger, she decided. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Carousel of Life. If you liked it, show your support by leaving a like or a comment below. I hope you'll join me next time for the final chapter. Take care.